Imagine looking at a report on your desk, just, a standard piece of paper. And it says, in black and white, that in a few minutes, 80 million people in your country could be dead.
It's just an unthinkable number.
And we're not talking about a movie script here. This isn't some kind of simulation or a video game scenario.
No, this was the absolute cold reality on a Tuesday morning in October of 1962. That number, 80 million, it's terrifying. It's a statistic that Robert Kennedy, the president's brother, actually cites in his book, 13 Days.
And he wasn't exaggerating for effect.
Not at all. He estimated that the nuclear missiles sitting in Cuba were, well, literally just a few minutes away from being fired.
Yeah.
And if they were, that's the devastation the American population was facing.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are laser focused on what is, I think, arguably the most intense 13-day period in human history.
Absolutely.
And for those of you tuning in specifically for IGCSE revision, you have definitely come to the right place. We are tackling the Cuban Missile Crisis.
But here's the thing, and this is so crucial if you're studying this. Our mission today isn't just to, recite a list of dates.
Right. Anyone can do that.
You can get dates from a timeline or a flashcard. Dates don't tell you why the world didn't end.
Exactly. We want to get under the skin of the event.
We want to step inside the room, the XCOM room, where President Kennedy and his advisors were sitting. We want to understand the crushing pressure, the genuine terror, and the logic behind the decisions that kept the Cold War from turning hot.
So we're going to move beyond the textbook summary. We're going to look at the how and the why. Here's our roadmap for this discussion. First, the discovery: how on earth did nuclear missiles get 90 miles from Florida?
Without anyone noticing.
Until it was almost too late. Then the decision: we're going to break down the 5 options the U.S. government was debating.
And finally, this showdown, the blockade, the secret letters, and that moment, the world just held its breath.
So let's start with the buildup, because like you said, these missiles didn't just appear out of thin air. We have to rewind a little to mid-1962.
Context is king here. You have to remember the Bay of Pigs fiasco just a year earlier.
A total disaster for the U.S.
A complete disaster. The U.S. backed a failed invasion to overthrow Fidel Castro. So naturally, Castro is paranoid. He's convinced the Americans are coming back to finish the job.
So he's looking for a powerful friend.
Exactly. And the Soviet Union, led by Nikita Khrushchev, is more than happy to provide protection.
It's a marriage of convenience, really. Castro gets security, Khrushchev gets a foothold in the Americas.
Precisely. So in May of '62, the Soviet Union publicly announces they're supplying arms to Cuba, and it ramps up incredibly fast. By July, Cuba has the best-equipped army in all of Latin America.
And we're not just talking about a few rifles, are we? The source material lists some staggering inventory.
It was a massive militarization. By September, the intelligence reports were alarming. Thousands of Soviet missiles. Now, these were initially defensive surface-to-air missiles.
The kind that shoot down planes.
Right, but they also had patrol boats, tanks, radar vans, jet fighters, jet bombers, and, crucially, 5,000 Soviet technicians on the island to run it all.
So the U.S. is watching this island, just 90 miles off its coast, turning into a fortress. And the big question hanging over Washington was, would the USSR dare put nuclear missiles on Cuba?
That was the million-dollar question. And surprisingly, looking back now, the entire U.S. intelligence community said no.
No, even with that kind of buildup.
It seems like a huge oversight in hindsight, but you have to understand the logic. The USSR had never placed nuclear weapons outside its own borders before. It was considered too risky, too provocative.
And the Soviets just denied it.
They flat out assured the U.S. they had no intention of doing so. The Soviet news agency basically said their missiles were so powerful they didn't need to put them in the Caribbean. They could hit the U.S. from Russia.
Famous last words, which brings us to October 14th, 1962, the turning point.
The oh God moment, really. An American U-2 spy plane flies over Cuba. It takes hundreds of photos. And when the CIA analysts looked at them, the denial was instantly over.
What did they see?
2 undeniable things. First, nuclear missile sites being constructed, and second, from the equipment and the layout, they were clearly being built by the USSR.
And these weren't just like plans for the future.
No, not at all. Some were nearly finished. The experts figured they could be ready to launch in just 7 days.
7 days. Wow.
And to make it worse, they spotted 20 Soviet ships crossing the Atlantic, probably carrying even more missiles.
I want to pause on the map here for a second because it really drives home the panic. It shows these range circles coming out of Cuba. Why does the geography matter so much?
It's all about flight time. The inner circle on that map, that's the medium-range missiles. They have a range of about 1,000 miles.
Which covers?
Washington, D.C., Chicago, Dallas.
And the flight time is what, 10 minutes?
Maybe 10 to 12 minutes from launch to impact. Barely enough time to even confirm it's happening, let alone do anything about it. It basically decapitates the U.S. command structure.
And the outer circle.
Intermediate range.
Yeah.
2,000 miles. That hits New York, pretty much anywhere in the U.S. except the Pacific Northwest.
So it completely bypassed the U.S. early warning system.
Completely. The DOW line, the big radar network, was all pointed north, expecting missiles to come over the Arctic. Nobody was looking south. It was like leaving the back gate wide open.
So Kennedy gets this news on Tuesday, October 16th. He immediately forms that special team of advisors.
The Executive Committee of the National Security Council, or, just ExComm.
And this brings us to the decision room. They sat down and brainstormed 5 distinct options. And this is a great part to study because it shows there was no easy answer.
And they really fought about them. The military wanted one thing, the diplomats another. Let's break them down.
Okay, I'll play devil's advocate. Option 1, do nothing.
The argument for that was, well, the U.S. still had way more nuclear weapons than the Soviets. Some advisors said, so what? It just stabilizes the standoff.
And the argument against?
It's a huge sign of weakness. Kennedy had publicly drawn a red line. If he ignores it, U.S. credibility is shot. Plus, the Soviets had lied directly to his face. You can't let that slide.
Okay, fair point. Option 2, surgical air attack. Just, blow them up before they're ready.
This was the military's favorite. General LeMay wanted to destroy the missiles immediately. Clean, quick, decisive.
But the downsides seem massive.
Oh, they were. First, you might miss one. And if you miss one, you could lose Miami or D.C. Second, you would definitely kill Soviet soldiers, which forces them to retaliate.
And the moral argument.
Robert Kennedy was really vocal about this. A sneak attack by a superpower on a small island. It looks like Pearl Harbor. It would turn world opinion against the U.S. instantly.
So, on to option 3, invasion. Full on, boots on the ground.
This solves the missile problem and the Castro problem. The U.S. forces were ready to go.
But isn't that just starting World War III?
Almost certainly. If the U.S. invades Cuba, the Soviets have to respond, probably by taking West Berlin. And once shots are fired in Berlin, well, the missiles start flying.
Right. Okay, option 4, diplomatic pressures. Go to the UN.
It avoids conflict. That's the big pro. But the cons, it takes too long. While you're debating in New York, the concrete is drawing on the launch pads in Cuba.
And that leaves option 5, the blockade.
Though they were very careful not to call it that. A blockade is an act of war. They called it a quarantine.
A strict quarantine on offensive military equipment.
Exactly. The plan was the U.S. Navy sets up a ring around Cuba. They stop Soviet ships. If they find missiles, they turn them back.
So what made this the winning choice?
It was the middle ground. It showed the U.S. was serious, but it wasn't shooting first. Crucially, it put the next move on Khrushchev. If he tries to run the blockade, he's the one starting the war.
But it wasn't perfect. The military hated it.
They thought it was weak. And their main point was valid. It didn't solve the problem of the missiles already on the island. It only stopped new ones from arriving.
So on Saturday, October 20, Kennedy decides on the blockade. But he keeps it secret for 2 days. Then Monday the 22nd, he goes on TV.
And that speech is iconic. Kennedy looks into the camera and lays it all out for a terrified nation.
There's a line in that speech that really stands out. He says, any nuclear missile launched from Cuba will be seen as an attack.
As an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
He's saying, if a missile leaves Cuba, we are nuking Moscow.
It's the ultimate line in the sand.
Yeah.
And Khrushchev reacts badly. He's furious. He sends a letter saying Soviet ships will not observe the blockade. He calls it piracy.
So we have a collision course, October 24. The blockade begins.
And this is the moment. A Soviet submarine and several ships carrying missiles are steaming right for that line.
And then?
At 10:32 a.m., the 20 Soviet ships closest to the zone just stopped. Some turned around.
That's the famous moment. We're eyeball to eyeball, and I think the other fella just blinked.
It's a great quote. But, and this is so important to remember, the crisis did not end there. The ships turning back was a relief, but the missiles were still in Cuba, and the workers were still building the launch pads.
The gun was still loaded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I want to bring up that cartoon from the London Evening Standard. It gives us the other side of the story.
The one by Vicky.
Yeah. It shows Kennedy shouting at Khrushchev, "Intolerable having your rockets on my doorstep."
Mm.
But Kennedy is standing on a map that shows U.S. bases in Turkey, Persia, Germany, totally surrounding the USSR.
It highlights the double standard.
It does. The Soviets felt surrounded. They thought, you have missiles in Turkey right on our border. Why can't we do the same? From their perspective, they were just balancing the scales.
Okay, so let's move into the darkest days, because even though the ships turned back, the tension actually got worse.
Yes, on October 25th, new photos showed work on the missile bases was speeding up. They were working day and night.
And then we get the tale of two letters. This is where it gets really dramatic.
It really does. On Friday, October 26th, Kennedy gets a long, rambling, emotional letter from Khrushchev. He offers a deal. If the U.S. promises not to invade Cuba, they'll remove the missiles.
That sounds like an off-ramp, a way out.
It was. But then, the next morning, Saturday the 27th, a second letter arrives. This one is stiff, formal, broadcast publicly on the radio. Now, Khrushchev wants a swap. He'll remove the missiles from Cuba, but only if the U.S. pulls its missiles out of Turkey.
So the price just went up. And on that same day, things get very real.
This is Black Saturday. An American U-2 spy plane is shot down over Cuba. The pilot, Major Anderson, is killed.
And this changes everything, right? The military advisors are looking at Kennedy saying, we have to hit back now.
Absolutely. Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, has this haunting quote about leaving the White House that night and looking at the sunset thinking, it was the last Saturday I would ever see.
That says it all. So Kennedy is in this impossible position. He's got two different demands, a dead American pilot and his generals screaming for war. What's the strategy?
It's a brilliant piece of diplomatic gambling. They decide to simply ignore the second letter.
Pretend it never arrived.
Basically, they draft a response only to the first, softer letter. They write back and say, okay, we accept your terms from Friday. We promise not to invade. They completely ignore the Turkey demand in the official response.
But surely Khrushchev wouldn't just accept that. The U.S. missiles in Turkey were a real threat to him.
Well, this is where the public story and the private story diverge. Officially, they ignored the Turkey trade, but privately, Robert Kennedy met with the Soviet ambassador that night.
A secret meeting.
A very secret meeting. And Robert Kennedy told him, look, we can't publicly trade the Turkey missiles. It would break NATO. But if you take the missiles out of Cuba, those Jupiter missiles in Turkey will be gone within 6 months. We just can't write it down.
A handshake deal in the shadows.
Exactly. And it worked. The next day, October 28, Khrushchev gets on the radio and agrees to dismantle the offensive arms and send them back to the Soviet Union to eliminate the conflict, which endangers the cause of peace.
The world could breathe again.
And that other cartoon, the one with them arm wrestling on hydrogen bombs, it captures that feeling of sheer exhaustion and relief. It wasn't a victory lap.
So let's wrap this up for our learners.
Wow.
If you're revising the Cuban Missile Crisis, what are the key takeaways?
First, remember, it's a progression of pressure. Discovery, then options, then the blockade, the standoff, and finally the resolution. You need to know that flow.
And the decision-making process was key.
Absolutely. The blockade was a middle ground choice that bought them time. And the resolution itself needed a mix of public firmness and very private compromise.
Right. It wasn't just Kennedy staring down Khrushchev until he blinked. It was both men realizing that if they didn't find a way to back down, everyone dies.
It all came down to communication.
And here's a final thought for you to chew on. For decades, the story was that Kennedy won by being tough, that the Soviets just retreated.
The victory narrative.
Exactly. But knowing what we know now about that secret Turkey deal, you have to ask, did the ignore the second letter strategy really work on its own? Or was the crisis actually solved by the very thing the U.S. publicly refused to do, a missile trade?
Sometimes the public victory is just a cover for the private compromise.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Good luck with your revision, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye, everyone.